Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give everyone a couple of minutes to get logged in before we get started. Um, Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. As everybody rolls in, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself and Tyler. So I'm Diana Sanchez. I work with the TCU Alumni Association. And then this is our special guest, Tyler, who will be talking to us about the art of feedback. Tyler, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Diana. I appreciate everybody being here today to talk about the art of feedback. I think one of the reasons I refer to it as the art of feedback is because there really is an artistic nature to how you have to deliver this. I hope some of that comes out today. We'll obviously combine it with some well-grounded research, some really important themes that we all can understand and learn from, but how we individually apply this is going to look just a little bit different. So with that in mind, I think it's important to let you know a little bit about why feedback is an important topic in general to me, as well as some of my experiences with feedback along my entire life journey, right? Not just professional journey, but I think feedback was a part of some of my earlier years as well. So my earliest years, I grew up on a ranch in the middle of Nebraska, a lot of work to be done, a lot of kind of more blue collar construction work. And obviously, when you're tasked with working on projects and things of that nature in that space, feedback is something that happens. And then I played sports. I played sports all through college, as well as playing football, or all through high school, and then played football throughout college. And feedback is inherently a part of everything that goes into sports and athletics. Transition out of college and into my first professional career, and I worked in collegiate strength and conditioning. I spent close to 10 years in that space. And again, feedback is an essential part, giving and receiving at this point in time. And then I transitioned more to the higher education side of things, working here specifically at TCU in leadership development. I'm a proud Horned Frog myself. I've got 2 degrees from here. And so, one of the interesting things I learned when I was at TCU was the fact that it's a very relational place to be. And I think that relational aspect really does play into the art of feedback. What does your relationship look like, and why does that matter? And then I transitioned for a few years into corporate America. And again, feedback is inherently a part of that. Now, I say feedback is a part of it because it's always happening. Sometimes it comes through with clarity, sometimes it lands with a really positive impact, but then there's other times when it's not so clear or when the impact is less than favorable. And we have to know and understand all of these moments because we want to get results. We ultimately, as people, as teams, and as organizations, want to get the most high performing results possible. One of the biggest and most important things that we need to do in that is to exchange information at a high level. One piece of information that needs exchanged is feedback. And so, as we get into this, as we start to talk about the art of feedback, we have our first poll question. So, we're going to have a couple questions early on in this time. I think they're going to help give me some insight into where your headspace is at and why this matters. So, go ahead and enjoy this first one. All right. I would imagine this is a pretty quick one for everybody to answer. Most yes or no questions are. That is what I was anticipating, right? 100% of you have received unclear feedback. Um, I just think it's a natural part of life, an unfortunate part, but a natural part of the work that we do. So we can take those results away, and we can focus on what we're going to do today. So obviously, you have received unclear feedback at some point in time. Most of us have. Let's look at a little bit more about why we're here and why maybe, just maybe, you have received unclear feedback. So we can take a look at this Harris poll, right? So they conducted a study that showed that 69% of managers said that they're uncomfortable communicating with their employees. That is over two-thirds. In addition, over one-third of managers said that they're not comfortable having to give direct feedback about their employees if they think the employees might respond negatively to the feedback. So when we think about that, it's almost like this opportunity to say, hey, I have an opportunity to give feedback. I think it's an important thing, but if I think there might be a negative reaction, I'm probably not going to give it. So we need to find a way to overcome that. So the way that we're going to overcome that is to have some conversation around today's agenda, right? We'll have some conversation around what does it look like to establish a mindset? Why is the way you think so important in everything that you do? Then we'll talk about the preparation. The preparation side of being able to deliver feedback is one that we can never take for granted. We've always got to make sure we allocate the time. And then we get to the point where we actually deliver. We have to actually execute and deliver this feedback if we want to see any sort of change even be possible. And then most things, if we're willing to sit down and be honest, I think most things that are really tough to deliver to someone, they're a real critical or constructive piece of feedback, are not a one and done. So we're going to have some sort of commitment and follow up. So this leads us to ask our next question, right? So our next question as we start to see this, I think is really going to help frame how we view things because it's about how you feel in giving critical feedback. I have some thoughts about how these answers might come through, but um, I'll be very, very interested to see what these results are as y'all submit your answers here. All right. So as you start to submit your answer, I'm sure you're anticipating what everybody else is going to answer, see what type of commonality we have in the room today. I will say as we think about this one, right, we're talking about I feel comfortable giving critical feedback to those I to those I lead. Your comfort with something can be a big indicator to whether or not you will actually do it, right? The leaving of our comfort zone is not an easy thing. So I will be curious what these results look like when we get those in. Okay. Well, good for some of you. I'm glad to hear that some of you do feel comfortable all the time giving critical feedback. I hope, though, for everybody that we can take and elevate your comfort with it, your understanding of it, and just your general overall preparation and delivery so that you can give the most high quality feedback regardless of what type of situation you find yourself in. So, as we continue to think about this, we're going to move forward from kind of this overall reason why we're here and sum it up a little more concisely. We're going to talk about our conversation journey. Because if we're talking about giving feedback, this is a conversation that needs to occur. I'm not a believer that it should be one way. I really do believe that this needs to be a two-way conversation. Both parties need to be actively involved, the person who is giving the feedback, as well as the one who's receiving it. We're primarily going to approach everything today from the standpoint, though, of the person delivering that feedback. And so this conversation journey is going to be geared towards your understanding of this process. And it's going to start with your mindset, transition into the preparation, look a little bit at the delivery component, and then talk about why that follow-up is so important. So we're first going to ground and root ourselves in this topic of mindset, and more specifically, a growth mindset. So, obvious question here, right? What is a growth mindset? And I'm sure by this point in time, all of you have heard this term. I am sure that all of you have thought about what does it look like for me to have a growth mindset specifically versus fixed. Now, I would say a fixed mindset and a growth mindset are really at two ends of a spectrum. And ultimately, what we want is for everybody to understand that the key to a successful mindset is the belief that everyone can improve. Right? That's what a growth mindset is. It's an understanding that everybody has the potential to continuously get better. A fixed mindset says there is only one level that I can get to. Once I get to that level, there's nothing beyond it. So our mindset is really critical to every behavior that we have. If we're going to have conversations about whether or not someone can improve, then we need to understand what our mindset is. If we believe that they can improve, we likely have a growth mindset. If we believe someone can't improve, we're a little bit more fixed, and hopefully you don't have anybody like that on your team. So this growth mindset concept is one that really allows us to say, hey, that was a challenge. Okay, I can be excited about it. Versus, hey, that was a challenge. I guess I'm just not good enough. Our mindset is ultimately going to determine how we respond to things like difficulty, effort, mistakes, and feedback. So if I have a growth mindset and I encounter a difficult situation, I might say, you know what? That's a little bit challenging. It looks like I have room for improvement. It looks like I have an opportunity now to get better. If I have a fixed mindset and I encounter difficulty, I might just be like, you know what? I guess I'm just not good enough. And then it transitions into effort. If I have a growth mindset, I'm going to put forth as much effort as I can on a given task, and I'm going to evaluate, was that enough effort to get the result I intended or not? If I have a fixed mindset and I say, hey, I guess that's all the effort I have to give, I guess it's just not going to work out. That's not the type of mindset we want people to have. And then we transition this to mistakes. Mistakes are going to happen. Undoubtedly, you are going to make and encounter mistakes at so many different levels and in so many different ways in life. Now, if we can look at mistakes or arguably call them even problems, problems are everywhere and they're ultimately going to be endless. If we have a fixed mindset, that's going to shut us down. If we have a growth mindset, we're going to look at a problem and say, you know what? This is just an opportunity for a solution. And I'll tell you personally, I love solutions, and I love solutions more than I love problems. So I focus on how do we overcome this, right? It's what happened and how do we get better. This how do we get better connects in the mindset to feedback because feedback is a part of the process that's actually going to allow us to get better. If we don't know what we didn't do well, or we don't know that we missed the mark, then we're not going to be able to improve. Feedback is an essential part that allows us to know, did we hit the mark? Did we not? And how do we improve and continuously move forward from that? Now, a key aspect of feedback is your mindset. Your mindset is going to lead you to hopefully establish a relationship, a team dynamic that is rooted and grounded in trust. So trust is an interesting thing. And so we can look at this slide here and see that trust is at the center. And when we look at this, we see trust is at the center of these four different things from compassion, consistency, character, and competence. And we're going to work our way from trust all the way out on all four of these rings. So when we see first and foremost what's connected and closest to trust, it's compassion. People ultimately need to know that you care before they're going to be willing to listen to your feedback. So if we're leading others and we're trying to figure out how to give them feedback, we need to first start with the relational dynamic and figure out, hey, are we implementing and executing compassion on a regular basis? Are we willing to care for their overall well-being and their ability to grow in this particular role and in life in general? Now, I think if you care for someone, you're willing to tell them hard or challenging things. When you care for someone, you're willing to put forth the effort to deliver high quality feedback. A lot of this is going to start by listening, by making sure that you listen to people with the intent to understand. You want to know what it's like to be in their shoes. And quite frankly, maybe based on the position you're in the company, it wasn't that long ago that you were, in fact, in their shoes. So just having this general awareness and this ability to shift your perspective to see yourself in their particular position is really a key in implementing compassion. This last one on here, I don't think it's often talked about with people from a specificity standpoint. Now, everybody wants to talk about the importance of recognition and celebration and reward, but we don't often have the conversation with people to understand, hey, how do you want to be recognized and celebrated? What does that actually look like? Are you the team member? Are you the person that wants to be up in front of the entire team and called out and said, hey, look at the great work that was done today? Like, we want to celebrate and recognize this. Is it better for you if someone just sends you an email acknowledging it? Is it better for you if someone recognizes and gives you some one-on-one time to have conversation or buys you a cup of coffee and just pours in and invests in your overall development? Understanding where someone's coming from, right? What they bring to the table and how you can help them bring the and maximize that day after day is a really important part of building trust. And that starts with how you think. Now, when we go out to this second ring, we can look at competence, right? We look at competence in the bottom right. This is one where your ownership over things really matters. You have to know your job and do it effectively and efficiently all the time. When you might find yourself in a new role, a new company, a new opportunity, there may be some things that you need to learn. Your competence is going to be directly connected to your investment in yourself. How willing are you to invest in yourself so that you can become the best person you possibly can? You start to build trust by showing up your best day after day repeatedly. And then you coach others. You are coaching others to get the most out of their experiences, maybe to elevate their performance as such that they can elevate to your peer, or maybe you're moving up and they can elevate into your position. Your competence poured in and invested into those people builds a level of trust that is really foundationally solid. And then we have to look at consistency on the bottom left. That's the next ring that's connected to trust as we work our way out. And the first thing with that is to be accountable. Now, accountable is probably one of my favorite buzzwords in leadership for about the last decade. I've worked at various different organizations, and accountable and accountability were topics that we had almost an endless amount of conversations around. And so, because of those conversations, I think one thing that I did is took away what does accountable or accountability actually mean? It's a word that's thrown out, right? I'm sure all of you have asked people to be more accountable. I'm sure someone has asked you to be accountable at some point in time. But do we ever clarify what that actually means? And that consistency and its connection to accountability causes us to have to define it. So when I look at what does it mean to be accountable, what does it mean to implement accountability amongst the entire staff or team? It starts with expectations. Expectations are the number one factor in creating accountability. If I establish and everybody understands my clear expectations, they have a chance to meet those expectations. If they fully meet those expectations, I feel like I can look at them and say, hey, you know what? You were accountable. That was great. Thank you for meeting those expectations. It helped the team drive forward to produce great results. But if expectations are not met, this is usually an opportunity for feedback. Why weren't expectations met? Because ultimately, I want to create a mechanism of shared accountability on my team. I want to make sure that I give clear expectations. You have clear expectations of your team members and myself. Those are all connected to the work that we're doing. And when we have a shared mechanism of accountability, because everybody's striving to meet expectations, everybody's delivering feedback at the necessary levels, we're all going to be accountable at the end of the day. That's going to show up by a display of stable performance, and it's going to show up in that you make high quality decisions that support the organization. That supporting of the organization ties into this fourth one, right? The ring that holds it all together. It's your character. This is letting people know that you are honest. Your behaviors, the things that you do day after day, are in alignment with your personal values as well as the organizational values. And then you're going to give credit where it's due. You don't build trust as a leader by taking all the credit. You may have, in fact, led this team forward, but that's your job. You have to give credit to others. So I think a lot of what it looks like to lead people is to facilitate a process. And when you facilitate or when you lead, you are doing something that is not about you, but it is up to you. So if you've ever had a leader that the team worked hard to put together a project or put together some sort of product at the end of the day, and that leader of yours took it to their supervisor and said, hey, boss, look what I did. I'm sure that you instantly lost trust and credibility in this person. But if they took what the team worked to create and then they took it to their boss and said, hey, boss, look what the team created. Look what some of these key individual high performers did. I really want you to give them a shout out. Pardon me. I really want to make sure that you acknowledge the hard work of the team and these individual key contributors because they're the reason this work got done. I don't want to make any of this about me. I want to make it about the team, the product we're trying to produce, and overall the goal and mission of the organization. That type of character is foundational and holds all of these others together as we seek to build trust at the highest of levels. And again, this starts with the way that you think. If you're willing to think differently, you're willing to act differently. You're willing to exhibit aspects of compassion, competence, consistency, and character. Now, you need to exhibit and behave in that way because you can't behave trust. Trust is a great thing to establish, but it's not a behavior. We know that if we are ultimately going to create a solid foundation as an organization, as a team, we need trust. So if you want a firm foundation for your house, you want to make sure that it is on solid ground and you've prepared in every single way to build this solid foundation for the structure you're going to put on top. If you have a solid foundation for your home, when rough weather comes in, your home is likely to be very stable. If you build on a really kind of fragile and falling apart foundation, you build a structure on top of that, it's going to completely fall apart at the first sign of adversity or storms or conflict. And I think understanding that analogy as it connects to your team is important because we want you to show up with a growth mindset where you believe that you can improve and all of your team members can improve. You want to exhibit behaviors that create a trusting environment, and you want that trusting environment to be there because that is a firm foundation. That gives you some structure, some stability, and some support where now you can engage in a difficult conversation and everything won't fall apart. If you don't have the firm foundation of trust, if you don't behave in ways that lead to others trusting you, and you give critical or constructive feedback, things might just completely fall apart. So we have to build everything on this solid foundation that starts with the way that you think, and developing or improving on this growth mindset is the way to go about doing it. Now, once you've established and continuously improved your growth mindset, and you find the opportunity that you need to have a conversation with someone, you need to deliver that critical feedback. You need to deliver information that's not necessarily going to be fun. It's not necessarily going to be easy. You need to invest in preparation. I'm going to tell you straight up, it's worth the time. You may be someone who's incredibly busy. You have all these individual tasks that you have to get done. You have to lead your team forward day after day, and you don't necessarily feel like you have ample time to prepare to deliver a feedback conversation. But I'm going to tell you, if you go in and you just wing it or you shoot from the hip, it's not going to go as well as if you prepare. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And so as we think about that, I would say that people make time for what's important. And if you believe that your people can get better, those that you lead and support can get better, you're willing to invest time in them and time outside of when you're actually in connection with them to prepare to deliver feedback. So let's consider a few things. If you actually get to the point where you say, you know what, I need to have an honest and constructive conversation with someone. I need to deliver some really important feedback. I have to be aware that there are some complications in this matter. Some of these complications could be the various experiences I have. Have I ever had feedback modeled for me in a really high quality way? Is this person used to receiving feedback, right? What are my motivations in this process? Am I motivated because I'm seeking some sort of transactional improvement? Or do I really believe that this person can change? They can improve, they can grow, they can get better. And then some perceptions. How am I perceiving every single aspect of what this individual does? Can I know and understand how do they perceive me? How do they perceive the work we're doing? How do they perceive the team? And then it's the demand on a leader's time. I'll be honest, I rarely, if ever, meet someone who says their time is not constantly demanded by something or someone. And this is true. And I would say usually this occurs with really good leaders. Really good leaders or really people who are really good at producing something have a huge demand on their time. And I often end up telling people after hearing their story, I kind of ask them a little bit of a question. I say, do you know what the reward for great work is? And they usually kind of pause and look at me for a second because they know I'm going to come with something. And I say, the reward for great work is more work. So if you are being more and more in demand, that might actually be because you are producing great results. And so those great results are going to be elevated if you're willing to spend a little bit of time in preparation to give feedback. Now, I would say categorically, we typically have two types of feedback conversations. These feedback conversations really kind of revolve around, did someone not meet a performance expectation or did they not meet a behavioral expectation? Both are typically worthy of a conversation. We'll talk about maybe the a little bit of importance, and elevated importance of one of them here in a moment. But if you have a team member who you have clearly laid out, here are our performance expectations, and they don't meet them, and they don't meet them for reasons that you can see a little bit, or maybe some that you can't, and you find it necessary to have a feedback conversation, you need to understand the specific expectation that wasn't met. So you need to rewind and say, did I give a clear expectation that this was an outcome or a metric or a goal that they actually needed to hit? Because honestly, at the end of the day, people are often known by whether or not they hit the mark or they didn't. Great leaders, great teams, great companies are known by the results that they produce. So if you are producing great results, you're going to be known. If you're not producing great results, you're also going to be known. So we have to figure out, was this performance expectation very clear? Because I got a result and this result isn't favorable. So now I get to craft the conversation around that. And then I get to look at, okay, maybe this was a behavioral expectation that wasn't met. And if a behavioral expectation wasn't met, why? Was it clearly stated that these are not appropriate behaviors for this team, for this organization, however that may be? Or is it more nuanced than that, that you're just like, oh, we don't necessarily have this clearly articulated, but that's not a behavior that we want to allow here. Now, I think performance expectations have a sense of urgency around them. We need to deliver that feedback in the moment so that the lesson can be learned and we can move forward and we can achieve the results that we're ultimately seeking. Behavioral expectations 100% need to be addressed as soon as possible. So carving out the time to prepare is essential. Because if you allow an inappropriate behavior to happen once, and you don't correct for it, you don't give feedback on how this is not in alignment with our team or our organizational values, you have in fact stated that this is an acceptable behavior and that behavior will show up more repeatedly. You've got to make sure that you address both of these, but the timeline on which you address the behavioral expectation might be a little bit more expedited. It might be a little bit more expedited, so you've got to do your homework, right? Regardless of what type of conversation, what type of expectation you're addressing, you've got to consider the following. I want to do my homework, I want to do my research and gather as many facts as possible. If I'm going to deliver a feedback conversation, if I'm going to have a conversation with someone where it's worthwhile and we got to carve out some substantial time, I want to come with facts. I want to come with as much solid and tangible information as I can. I've got to be specific. I've got to describe all aspects of the situation, and I've got to leave all my opinions and assumptions at the door. If my opinions and assumptions are a part of my preparation, if I don't dispel them, I'm not going to get the results that I want. And those results that I want are ultimately going to be because I consider the person. I would say that if you have the ability to customize the message for the individual that you're having a conversation with, you're going to see a better result. That is because simply we all prefer to be communicated with in a certain manner. We just truly do. And so if I'm willing to get out of my comfort zone and think about, hey, how does this person want to be communicated with? So if I consider that, how do I craft my message slightly different? Maybe I want to deliver it in a certain way, but I start to process that a little bit. And I'm like, man, if I come in with that, they're probably not going to be receptive to it. Or if I'm not direct enough, they're not going to remember it. They're not going to change the behavior. They're not going to deliver on the expectation. So I've got to think about this individual and the specificity at which they prefer communication. And then I've got to consider the environment. So if you are setting up an opportunity to have a feedback conversation, you need to choose a great location. This location should be relatively neutral in nature. I mean, I think if it's in your office or their office and you have a choice, I think their office might be a better space to go, but it needs to be as free of distraction as possible. These distractions could be things like just audible noise, people walking through a space, and just a lot of other chaotic things, right? Outside the building noise, We want to try to find the best possible location to have this conversation because I don't want something detracting and taking away from the message I'm trying to deliver. So that neutral location, that location that's free of distraction, if you can carve out and reserve that type of space, you're going to have greater success in this. And then provide balanced feedback. And so this providing balanced feedback is really thinking more all-encompassing. It's how do you as a leader make sure that you are consistently providing feedback? You're providing feedback anytime something gets done, right? A project gets finished, a goal gets met or it doesn't get met. We come to the end of a certain phase of a project. Providing consistent, clear feedback is really essential. Now, when we think about working to make feedback positive and constructive, as well as part of the normal culture, we know that we have a little bit of work to do. We know that we need to be working towards an environment, towards an organizational culture that just freely exchanges information. So you know when you did something well, you know when you did something not well, and we are always going to exchange that information. The balanced feedback is really important, and we'll talk a little bit about what that balance looks like as we get into the delivery component, because I don't want anyone to misunderstand that necessarily in every conversation there has to be positive. We may have the opportunity to just deliver constructive feedback. And then we have to use this great model that comes from the Center for Creative Leadership. So they developed this model, and in shorthand, it's called the SBI model. This is where we make sure that we fully describe the situation. We're painting as clear a picture as possible about what actually happened, when it happened, where it happened. We're providing the full details so that as we look at this, everybody can remember, oh, yeah, that's exactly what happened. Okay, that's where we were, that's when. Okay, now I can take my mind back to it if I'm the person receiving the feedback. And then you want to make sure that you describe the observed behavior. Now, I think this is an interesting one, right? Because there is also a behavior in a missing of performance expectations, not just a behavior when we miss or don't align on a behavioral expectation. Those gaps in behavior or those misses in behavior when we're seeking to meet a performance expectation could be that the email wasn't sent on time, the report wasn't drafted correctly, any number of other things that are not an inappropriate behavior in terms of our workspace, but they're a behavior that led to a less than favorable result. So describing what that behavior looked like, right, is really important. Don't assume that you know what that person was thinking. So don't necessarily put words in your mouth through the process. You're just talking about, I observed this, and then you're stating the impact that occurred, right? What did you think? What did you feel? What made you react to that specific behavior? So when we ensure clear feedback, we're making sure that we're discussing the situation, the behavior, and the impact it had. And keeping this quick little 1, 2, 3 in mind as you prepare can allow you to jot down notes. You can type them up, you can write them down. It depends on what you take into that meeting with you. Do you just want to study it in advance and then be able to remember and go through it? Do you need to take your computer or your notebook in there so that you can have something to revisit as well as take new notes? This type of preparation of making sure that you are encountering every single fact you can and you're describing the fullness of the picture is going to allow you to do arguably the thing that you set out to do, which is deliver feedback. This is the conversation that creates change. So here's what I want to quickly address before we get into the model that I have next, right? It's the model that I really think fits really well for any type of situation. However, I've been engaging in feedback in courses on feedback for enough time now. I hear some stories about other methods that people prefer to use. Now, if you have a preferred method of giving feedback and it's working really well from you, then I would say to go ahead and continue to do that and consistently figure out how do you elevate that a little bit more. However, I will caution you to one very common type of feedback or a delivery mechanism for feedback that I don't typically advocate for. And so I have a lot of people share with me that they have received feedback in the form of the sandwich method. So I'm sure many of you out there have used the sandwich method. I'm sure that you have received feedback through the sandwich method. Well, I'll tell you why it's a little bit risky of a method to choose. Because if we're trying to create a dynamic delivery, a delivery that creates an impact, we want the message to be very clear. And I've often seen and experienced someone deliver feedback using the sandwich method where there was a lot of emphasis on the front end, where here's all the good things that are going on, here are the good things that you're doing. And then there was a subtle hint to the constructive feedback that needed to be given, and it was really brief or abrupt. And then, oh, by the way, all of these things are really good, and we're happy with your performance, and this, that, and the other. That is a sandwich, but that is a sandwich that has two very thick slices of bread and nearly nothing in the middle, nothing of substance that you really want to sit there and enjoy. And so you can use the sandwich method. I would just caution you to make sure that the bread part of that, the two ends, are not too thick, are not too time consuming. Because what we're striving to do in most situations that connect to what we're talking about today are to deliver a constructive or critical piece of feedback that changes a behavior, that drives an individual's performance to a higher level so that the team wins and the organizational wins. And when we do that, we can embrace this type of model. This conversation model is one that allows for a dynamic delivery and allows for you to do some really good things. So you've obviously set this meeting with the individual, right? It's on the calendar, it's something that's set, you have the room, you have the location, you have all those considerations in mind. You've done your homework and you've prepared. Now, it is important very early on in this meeting, basically from the get-go, that you clarify, why are we here? If someone knows the purpose of something, hopefully not just when they show up, but maybe a little bit ahead of time, they have the opportunity to process and better understand what's going to happen. So then, in addition to clarifying the purpose of the meeting, you want to make sure that your words and actions matter, right? You want to make sure that your nonverbal and your verbal are in direct alignment. You don't want it to seem vague. You don't want it to seem like, well, I'm telling you something that's really critical and it's a real negative that we need to curb, but I sound really incredibly happy, right? I need to make sure there's the maximum amount of clarity in this particular meeting. And then I want to make sure that I'm also letting you know that I'm advocating for you. If you go into a meeting to give critical feedback and someone knows that you're still advocating for them, right? You've built this level of trust because you know they can improve. And you go into that opportunity and say, you know what? I'm here because I think that you can get better. I know that you can get better. I know that I've seen you do better work than this, or I know that you don't want to exhibit this behavior because it doesn't run in congruence with what our organization is about. When you lead with that advocacy and you are not blaming them, but letting them know that you want them to succeed, then you're doing it together as a partnership. It is not a dictatorship opportunity. It is a partnership in which both parties are going to learn, grow, and improve for the good of each other, for the good of the team, and for the good of the organization. And then in this conversation, this is where a lot of your homework and preparation phase comes out, right? You want to be candid of the realities of the situation. You want to make sure that you're not adding a lot of filler or fluff into this. You're not, well, I kind of sort of think that I want to share, right? You want to be really direct and clear on the realities of the situation. And this is where the SBI model comes in. So you want to state, what was the situation? What was the behavior? What was the impact that was had? And then how do you know and understand their perspective? Because there's a really good chance that their perspective is a little bit different than yours. This is where you have the opportunity to create a dialogue, where you're able to have a back and forth conversation to better understand, hey, I'm delivering this important information to you. I want to advocate for you to the fullest extent because I believe you can get better. But tell me your side of things. Help me understand your position and your perspective. Then you're stating your reality, you're stating the reality that they experienced, and then we have the ability to get alignment. Excuse me. This alignment is going to come about with effort. This alignment and commitment to the next steps is going to only happen with effort. So when you're in this meeting and you've gone through everything that you needed to go through, right? Sharing this information back and forth, dialoguing, it's important to figure out how are we going to align and commit on a solution to move forward. Because let's be honest, there is a really good chance that if you had to take the time to prepare and deliver this conversation, it's not a one-time thing. You are likely going to need to create the opportunity to have some sort of follow-up. You are going to likely need to create a plan to hold each other accountable. Now, when you create this plan, there has to be shared expectations that are agreed upon. You have to do all the things that lead to accountability. Pardon me. Let me. Grab a quick drink here. Now, when you create this alignment and commitment to next steps with this effort, this person is going to see, you know what? They really are advocating for my success. They're not just trying to throw blame. They see the best that I have to bring to the table and they want to bring that out, not just in this moment, but consistently. So we also need to keep in mind some other supporting behaviors in this process. So here's what we have: things to do and things not to do. If I'm engaging with someone that I lead and support, and I've got to give them really constructive feedback, I want to make sure that my body language is open. I want to make sure that my tone is such that everything seems like we're trying to find a solution, we're trying to improve. I don't want to be closed off. I don't want to be tense. I don't want to have a pen that I'm clicking. I don't want to give any sort of nervous fidgeting gestures that take away from the message I'm trying to deliver. Because what the research shows us is about 93% of in-person communication is nonverbal. It's not the words you're actually saying. So you've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what are the important words that I want to share, but also what are the important verbal signs, right? Those body language things that I want to share, that I am, in fact, saying this and my body language is backing it up. So body language is a really interesting one. Obviously the research shows that 93% of communication in person is nonverbal, body language being one of those key things. I heard years ago, it's probably, man, it's probably been at least 15 years ago, I heard a quote from John Calipari, right? A famous college basketball coach. He was working with a group of high school students one summer at an AAU camp. And I don't remember the overall message, but one of the things that he said that stuck out was this fact. He said, body language never whispers, it screams. So if you have tense or fidgeting body language when you're trying to deliver really important critical information to someone, they're going to see all of that body language. It's going to be screaming at them, and they're not going to hear the actual words that you're saying. So you want them to hear the actual words. So understand how to open your body language, right? How to shift and adjust your tone at different moments in the conversation so that ultimately you can get your message across. Because all of us have a message we want to deliver, and we want to have that land with the most positive impact. Some other things that you need to keep in mind with this are to be fully present, make eye contact, don't be distracted looking out the window, don't constantly be looking elsewhere. Really engage with this individual. Let them know that you actually do care, you are fully present, and you're not looking to rush the conversation, right? Simple little things, right? Make sure your phone is on silent. Don't try to answer texts or emails in the middle of this conversation, right? Don't show that you're distracted and this is of not important, right? Show that this is actually important and be fully there. And then when you get to the dialogue portion, right, this is where you share the realities, the things that you've directly observed. When you want them to share, ask some really good open-ended questions, right? You want them to share the fullness of their story so that you can understand and create alignment. You want to avoid in this type of conversation being very prescriptive or telling them every single thing to do. Now, there may be a point where you tell them, I need you to change this behavior. I need you to do something different, but make sure there is the opportunity for the open-ended questions. And then make sure that you recognize and avoid the condescension, right? We want to make sure that we understand the fullness of their perspective so we can ask some really good clarifying questions. We want to avoid the condescending nature of things like, stop being like that about this. You're going to be fine, right? We want to engage in a really thorough and thoughtful conversation. And then at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we fully accept and thank them for being involved in the conversation. We don't want to pass judgment on them in this way, right? Where we're condescending again. I'm really surprised you did that. We want to make sure that we just engage in this dialogue. We take the information for what it is, and we figure out how to move forward. And that moving forward is really the final phase of our conversation journey, because you've taken the opportunity to deliver content, to deliver information, to share what this individual can improve on, because clearly they didn't meet one of your expectations, the team's expectations, the company's expectations. And whether that was performance related or behavioral related, we've got to find a way to drive this conversation forward. We've got to find a way to make sure that this is not the only time we ever visit this. We want to continue to build on positive change. So if we're going to build on positive change, we can take a look at this ladder, and we can look at where we have to start on a ladder is at the bottom. And if we're going to climb all the way to the top, to get to that peak or pinnacle, we do this, right? We immediately in this moment, we finish delivering the conversation, we've gotten alignment. Let's go ahead and schedule the follow up. Let's say, hey, this is a conversation that we're going to revisit in 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever the case may be. Figure out what does that look like. But we're going to actually follow up. We're going to get this on the calendar, right? We're going to schedule it so that it's a known priority and we're not going to cancel it. When we get to that opportunity, our scheduled follow-up, we're going to review any and all progress. We want to make sure that we continue this conversation with the focus on their development. Because if you truly care about someone, you're going to invest in their development, you're going to give them feedback as a part of it, and you're going to start to get better results because of this. So reviewing this progress, sharing with them what they've done well, where they can continue to grow, and how all of this is advantageous to them and the team will also include the recognition of this progress. So this is the celebration aspect. Earlier, we talked about as we build trust, we want to make sure that we know and understand and recognize how do people want to be appreciated. So if we can recognize them in these moments in the way that best connects to how they want to be recognized and celebrated, they're going to be like, you know what? This person actually does care. They really do want to give me this feedback because they think I can improve and get better. So I'm more receptive and open to it. And then lastly, if this is going to be something that's ongoing long enough, we need to just repeat the process. Determine if this is an ongoing coaching conversation that needs to happen. We can repeat this until it's no longer needed. All right. So when we establish and understand that grounding ourselves in a really solid mindset, taking the time to prepare, delivering a solid conversation and following up, we can take this journey with an individual and we can make sure that we best understand how to support them. Because ultimately, I think all of you are probably in a position where you want to create impact. You want to create positive impact in such a high level way that I think it probably connects to this quote from Stephen Covey. So Covey says, one of the greatest gifts you can give another human being is constructive feedback on a blind spot they never knew they had. It's a great disservice not to say what needs to be said just because it isn't comfortable. Care enough to give honest, accurate feedback. And this, I think, sums it all up, right? If you care about someone, you will push outside your comfort zone to do all the necessary shifting of a mindset, all the necessary preparation, and actually deliver the conversation so that improvement can happen. Because if we care enough to give honest, accurate feedback, someone else is going to care enough to give us honest, accurate feedback. And if we do that, if we have that type of accountable system built within our team, we're all going to improve and we're all going to grow. Now, I want to wrap up with one final call to all of these, and then I want to make sure that we do save about the last 10 minutes of our time together to get through some questions, answer anything that may be on your mind. But let's talk about this, right? This is our conversation journey, but a little bit expanded. It's the art of feedback. All of this information that I shared with you today has some grounding in research. It has been researched and shown that this works. These are the best practices. These are things that, if you do them, are very likely to yield positive results. It's not a guarantee, but it's really likely. The likelihood increases when we understand the art of feedback, the artistic nature of everything that we're doing. So we're blending all the best practices, all the researched information with our personality, with our company culture, with every little intricate detail of who I am, who the company is, and who this other person is. And that's why it's the art. It's the art because it's never going to look the same for every single person. It's never going to look the same in every situation. Now, there are going to be similarities. There are going to be things that you can do to consistently and continually improve and grow so that now maybe it doesn't take you quite as long or quite as much energy as you get ready and go in and deliver this. You're going to create a culture that just continues to elevate. And all of this happens because first and foremost, you have a mindset that is about growth and development. You truly believe that people have the ability to get better, yourself included. And so if you invest in this process for yourself and you invest in this process for your team members, all of you are getting better. And then you're going to prepare. You're going to invest the time and effort because anything that is worthwhile takes time and takes effort. And so if you can carve out and schedule these opportunities to pencil it in and be like, okay, I'm going to spend 30 minutes preparing for this conversation. I'm going to get everything I need to down on paper. I'm going to review it, and then I'm going to be able to best deliver it. So this delivery needs to be caring and clear. And I want to make sure that I clarify the word caring because caring isn't about being soft or overly sensitive. It's about no, truly caring to say something to someone that will help them get better, even if it's hard for you to say, or even if it's hard for them to hear. This is a really important aspect of the relational dynamic at work. If you care enough about someone, you'll challenge them, you'll push them, you'll make sure they're in a state of growth, not always in a state of comfort. Because progress comes in the growth phase, nothing but comfort comes in the comfort phase. So we got to make sure that we deliver in a caring and clear manner. And then we want to follow up. We want to make sure that this is an ongoing process on this really specific piece of constructive feedback. But we also want to follow up with every single person that we lead and support with consistent feedback. We want to share with them positive feedback. We want to share with them constructive feedback. We want to create a culture that has feedback in it day after day so that then when I go to have this critical conversation with someone, it's not awkward, it's not tense. It's just, yeah, this is information being exchanged. And when information is exchanged at the highest levels on a consistent basis, we're all on the same page and we drive forward with high performing results. With that in mind, I definitely appreciate your time today. Carving out a little bit of your day is always a trick. It's always a challenge to get done. So please let me know any and all questions that we can try to answer during our remaining time. And here's my contact information. I'm more than happy for you to call, text, email. Let me know how I can help you. I oftentimes deliver this content over the course of 3 to 4 hours, where there's also a lot of practice involved in it so that we don't just talk about it, we actually do it. Hearing this in a one-sided way hopefully helps you improve and grow, but the real magic happens when you're willing to take time to practice. So again, we can answer any and all questions, and y'all don't hesitate to reach out. Good. Back here. So yeah.
We do have some questions in the question box.
Okay.
So there's any tips for providing feedback when you are only able to communicate via Zoom meetings?
Mm. Yeah. So I think anytime that you're only communicating through the digital space, right, through the computer screen or through the phone, you have to become a better and better communicator. You have to make sure that your word choice, your tone, and the overall flow of your message is elevated because you can't make up for it in the way you can with the in-person, where you can kind of get a feel or a sense for the environment. I'll say a couple more things about this. I look at the remote work or the long distance supervising, very similar to a long distance relationship that you might be in with someone else. You've got to change how you communicate because they're not right there beside you all day, every day. So the questions you ask and the information you ask have to be at a higher level because the screen just limits our ability to actually connect. So with this, I would say some of the things that can be helpful is to check in with a little bit more frequency and maybe even a shorter duration of time. So how do we exchange feedback multiple times a week? How do we do that for shorter periods of time? How do I establish that culture through Zoom where I am providing it? It's it's a bit of a tricky situation to be in, but when you can figure out, okay, yeah, we're on Zoom, so I have to set really clear expectations. I've got to communicate without near as much filler as I could get away with in person. This is the way I can do it. And another thing that might be helpful with that is to follow up with some written components so that what you had in conversation is also backed up by an email or other sources that you have. So hopefully that is a helpful process.
And we also have another question about access to the slide after the presentation.
Yeah, I'm happy to save this and send it out to everybody. I'll probably save it as a PDF so it is a little bit easier to send, not quite as large of a file. But yeah, I'm happy to share this with anyone and everyone.
Okay, great. And then would you apply the same process to written feedback? We are asked to provide feedback to others, some that don't report to us directly in our review process.
Mm. Yeah, I think when you are providing written feedback, it is definitely important to make sure that you are incredibly clear. And I would say, yeah, I don't know that I would do much different other than instead of speaking this information, I would just make sure it is written and written in the way that is best for the situation, right? I think I saw that question a second ago popped up. Oh, and yeah, if it's written feedback that's going to be reviewed by everybody, I think deciding how much personal information is disclosed in that, do you want it to be identified that it was you or not? Those are just some interesting considerations to keep in mind.
And then any questions when you have a superior that is, or any suggestions when you have a superior that is resistant to giving and receiving feedback that leads to improvement? How do I approach?
That is a really tough situation, right? If you have someone that is your superior that I think we can definitely approach it from they're resistant to giving feedback. I think you need to be persistent about it and figure out how can you ask those high quality questions. I definitely have been in that situation before where I've asked for feedback from my supervisor, and I would often get really unclear or vague, just like, yeah, things are going really well, or yeah, I'm sure there's always ways for all of us to improve. I think you have the opportunity as you manage up to ask really specific and intentional questions, and just kind of set the tone that those are the type of questions that you're going to ask on a regular basis. You're seeking information because you want to improve. You're not doing this to be critical in any particular way, but you are excited to learn and grow and develop. And hopefully, if you're able to communicate that and craft some really good questions, you are able to get feedback. But ultimately, you only control yourself. So if someone is unwilling to give feedback, they're going to be unwilling. But I think pushing forward to overcome that with some really good open-ended questions, as well as just an explanation for why you want the feedback, can be some helpful things to do.
Um, we also have having trouble with giving my intern feedback tips. It's tougher when they are here only a short time and getting
Mhm.
into the groove.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. So I'm going to assume that this is an intern that basically has a summer internship from college. Not sure what year they are in school. I'm going to go ahead and assume upperclassmen in this particular situation. They're not there for a long time, but they can be there for enough time to learn and grow. And I think if you frame everything around hey, here's something we do here. We provide feedback on a regular basis. Here are the tips and best practices for how we deliver it. Are you comfortable with me giving you feedback on a regular basis? And just really asking them, right? You may really want to give them feedback, but if you initially ask them, hey, are you comfortable with me giving you feedback? Or hey, if there's something I see that you could improve on or do, what's the best way I could deliver this feedback? There might be a generational difference in there. So if you ask them their preference for how they like to receive feedback, maybe when they like to receive feedback, um, that can be something that you can schedule, and it takes away maybe any of the loaded or negative connotation that might come there because you're really putting them in the position of power, saying, "Hey, are you willing to let me provide you feedback? If so, how do you want to receive it? I want to make sure that you get the most out of this internship, so that you can be, a high performing professional in the very near future."
Okay, we also have what is the ideal length of time for a feedback conversation for scheduling purposes?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I think it depends on how big the topic is, how long has this gone on, and how do you address it? I think that from my experience with giving feedback as well as coaching others to give feedback, I think a lot of things can be done in 30 minutes. Some push into that 45 or an hour session. So I just kind of evaluate what's the culture around communication at your organization? How much time can both parties really give? Um, can we schedule it for an hour? And if we get done a little bit earlier, that's great. Or do we only have 30 minutes and now I've got to make sure I hit on just the most important aspects?
Thank you. And then, do you have a preference on location for providing feedback? Probably overthinking it, but want your thoughts. Your office, their office, Zoom.
Yeah, if you're an in-person company, I am in there's offices. I'm always a big fan of their office or a neutral meeting space that isn't out in the middle, that isn't really in an open space. So those are the things that I would say. I would try if you can avoid Zoom, I would avoid it. If it's your only option, then yes, you make the most of it.
And our last question, any advice on how to give feedback to clients who are paying you for your coaching, especially when they
Mhm.
aren't happy with their progress, but you don't want to lose them as a client. If you give them feedback they don't want to hear and or aren't doing everything you are suggesting slash recommending.
Mm, that is a tricky one. I think it a little bit is established by what is this coaching engagement about? Um, what degree of accountability was agreed upon at the beginning. Um, Obviously, if you're in the midst of it, it's a little bit tricky. But hopefully, if you are coaching people and you want to give them feedback, I would make that a part of your initial conversation. I would say, hey, at various points in time, I want to make sure that I provide you feedback on how I think the process is going, what things are going well, maybe what things aren't. I'm gonna try to share things that I see that could be blind spots or opportunities for improvement. And yeah, at any point in time that I do this, I hope that you're open to it, and I'll always, ask you that question before, "Is now a good time to share some feedback?" Um, if ultimately, though, if someone doesn't wanna hear feedback, that's a whole 'nother session that I'm working to develop, is how do we get people to best be ready to receive feedback? Um, I would also I'd say, right, you said paying you for coaching. I would just say that, finding a way to get them to understand that, "Hey, you are paying me for a service, and I wanna provide you the highest level of service, and a part of that is giving you this particular constructive feedback." And, hopefully that answer is somewhat helpful.
All right, well, Tyler, thank you for another wonderful webinar session. This will be very helpful for a lot of people that want to learn about the art of feedback. We will be sending out a follow-up email with a recording of today's session. And then Tyler's information is on the screen if you want to reach out to him directly. We appreciate your time. Thank you again, Tyler. We look forward to seeing you all soon and go Frogs.
Y'all have a great day.